Hello again, I am Blunty, and this will be my review of Pokemon X and Pokemon Y. Specifically, I've been playing Pokemon X. The only real difference between the two is a different legendary and a few different exclusive Pokemon between the two titles. They are the latest pair of core RPG Pokemon titles to hit shelves, of course, and the first of the series to be built natively for the 3DS system. Now, first things first, I will be keeping this as spoiler-free as humanly possible. Pretty much all the footage I'll be showing you is before the second gym battle, and there'll be no story spoilers at all. And in fact, this review will be more about what the game is like to experience in general, rather than drilling down into every crack and detail. Now then, this has been out for just over 2 weeks now, and I've deliberately waited to put my review together this long for two main reasons. Well, 2.5. Now, firstly, because I wanted to play at my own pace, not rush through it for the sake of churning out a half-assed review as fast as possible because link bait, but also because all the early adopters already have the game, so they don't really need a quick review. But secondly, and most importantly, being a global release, this is the first time us Westerners have been able to go into a new Pokemon RPG game utterly unspoiled. Before now, we'd have to wait something like a year or more between the Japanese release and the English language version, and by that time, everything was spoiled and discovered and unveiled and uncovered and talked about and broken down and all that kind of stuff. And a year is a very, very long time to try and stay spoiler-free if you want to go in blind. It's virtually impossible, in fact. But this time around, between the global release and Nintendo keeping tight control on leaks, I have, for the first time in my life, been able to start a Pokemon journey not knowing what to expect at all, unaware of what new monsters I may discover, or how the story would unfold, or what kinds of towns and wildernesses I'd be exploring, so I didn't want to rush it for myself, or risk taking that wonderful experience away from someone else. Because it was wonderful. The entire quest had me feeling a constant sense of joy and wonder and excitement. I was truly exploring this world, not just playing a game where I already knew that, well, the next gym leader was using a Steel-type Pokemon, so I should prepare for that, and in the third town I'll have to battle the main antagonist or something, and he'll have this Pokemon that I should be ready for. But this time around I had no prior knowledge, and it was exciting! And the same goes for the fistful of new Pokemon I was discovering. And while these games don't swell the roster of monsters nearly as much as the previous game did, we're already 700 and something strong, there are still a few good selection of new Pokemon to discover, and some of whom now rank amongst my personal favourites, and a couple who made up core members of my own team for the majority of my journey. The game has a whole new look and feel over its sprite-based progenitors. Now it's all 3D models through and through, and not only does it look just beautiful, the environments sort of swarm with life and energy. It really does feel for the first time like a living, thriving world. And some of that life and energy is down to how the camera can now move through the environments. It can scroll and move and push around to react to where you're walking, and they use this very cleverly to hide some things in the world that you only see from certain angles if you stand at a certain place, and it's wonderfully clever and well done, and it just works really well. It's a wonderful... I mean, it is a fully automatic in-game camera. You've got no control over the perspective, but it's used wonderfully. And while the game is rendered from 3D models, there's only a few places where the scenes are actually displayed in full-on dimensional 3D on the 3DS's glasses-free 3D screen. And these are the battles, and some occasional cutscenes, and special character interactions. And in the battles in particular, I think we can learn why the rest of the game and the overworld in general are restricted to two-dimensional viewing. Because under certain circumstances, the frame rate drops noticeably, especially when there are two or more complex 3D Pokemon models being displayed and animated simultaneously. It seems that the 3DS just doesn't quite have enough grunt to push everything around in this beautiful game into true 3D the whole time. And frankly, I'm okay with that. Like I keep saying, it looks freaking lovely anyway, and I kept the 3D off for much of my own playthrough anyway, and I played much of it on the 2DS because I was testing that for a review, which of course can't display 3D anyway. So not really much of a big deal as far as I'm concerned. Now, the pacing of the game is just nailed. There was never a single moment where it didn't feel like you were making progress, either through the main story or just as a Pokemon trainer on your adventure. Every minute of game time feels like you're advancing in some way. The main story plot, as it refers to the antagonist, the bad guy in the game, is pretty thin, as it is in most of these games really, but there is enough there to keep things flowing and inject a sense of the wider world happening around you while you're on your adventure as a trainer. And there aren't as many side quests or fetch missions as I expected either. The NPC dialogue and conversations are either useful or just wacky or slightly bizarre, and as always in a Pokemon game, speaking to each and every non-player character you come across is highly recommended. Sometimes you just get a laugh, sometimes you'll be like, WTF mate, what did you just say? And more often than you'd think, you'll actually get some very handy items gifted to you, or be offered a Pokemon trade. The main plot has a reasonably predictable twist to it, but it does get very, very dark very quickly, and it's a beautiful and slightly shocking, oh wow moment. But things don't really stay very dark for very long, and soon enough you're back bouncing through the happy world of magical monsters trying to kick each other's teeth in at the whim of children and adults alike. Now, Pokemon X and Pokemon Y feel much easier than most entries in this series. Sometimes it holds your hand a little too strongly for my tastes, and other times it bizarrely kind of offers no hints at all for brand new players where perhaps there should be hints. The puzzles are simpler and fewer. I blew the ever-loving poop out of every gym leader I faced, and even the Elite Four, supposedly the toughest trainers in the land, didn't present me with nearly the challenge they usually do. In fact, I got through the entire game without ever blacking out because my entire team was wiped out. And I feel that the lack of difficulty in this game is a very deliberate decision. With Pokemon X and Y, I think Nintendo are trying to addict a whole new generation of trainers to the franchise. So between the superbly polished game mechanics, the wonderful flow and pacing, and the not very punishing difficulty, they're trying to lead to a very sort of rewarding experience. And while I wish there was more of a challenge in the game, the ease of most battles didn't actually deter me. At no point did I think, oh, this is too easy, why am I bothering? I was still having fun, and I was still feeling a constant hum of simple, pure joy. On the whole, the game is much less grindy than the predecessors too, or rather it can be if you want it to be. There are some new systems and features in the game that allow you to raise and train your team much faster and much more evenly than ever before, and without having to camp outside of a town for hours and hours and then trying to level up your team before the next gym battle. See, where in previous games, I personally would usually wind up with a team of 2, maybe 3 extremely powerful Pokemon on my team of 6, with the rest of them being of significantly lower level that I really couldn't use if my main pair got KO'd. But this time around, I was able to train up a very even and well-rounded team of all 6 monsters. They were all useful at any point. And this also meant that I was experimenting more, switching out more, trying new combinations more often. And I loved this. The game as a whole felt far more balanced and polished than anything that has come before it. Every facet of the core game has been honed and tweaked and shined. Shined? Shown? Whatever. The attention to detail is astounding. There's a million tiny tweaks and little references or cheeky sideways glances in this game that make it truly live and breathe. And especially for those of us who are old school Pokemon trainers who've been with the series for the 15 years it's been around, there are so many little nudges and winks to the old games. Make no mistake about it, this game was a labour of love and passion, and it shows in every corner that it has. And there's even a ton of extras and ancillary features I've not even touched on yet. Extras like the virtual pet type mini-games, which can also be used to train up your Pokemon statistics more specifically and more easily than ever before. And the truly fantastic and highly accessible online systems for trading and battling. They work wonderfully, so much more easy, more intuitive and less complicated and more rewarding than they ever have been. Like I keep saying, this is the most highly polished, most fluid, most refined and beautiful Pokemon game there has ever been. It took me an unrushed 33 hours to complete the main story mode. If you rush, you'll miss a ton of awesome stuff, but you can probably be done inside of 8 hours. And I know some other people out there who've sunk 40 plus hours and not even challenged the last gym yet. But now, after completing the core story mode after that 33 hours and having sunk in a total of just over 58 hours as I type this, I can tell you, unreservedly, without caveat or qualifier, this is the very best Pokemon RPG game that the wonderful people at Game Freak have ever put out there. If you have never played a Pokemon game before, this is a brilliant place to start. If you used to play Pokemon and fell away from the series somewhere along the way, this is the game to bring you back. It is both fresh and exciting and warm and familiar in a truly spectacular and welcoming and inviting balance. This is not only the best Pokemon game that I've ever played, and I have played them all, but it's easily one of the most wonderfully rewardingly fun games I have played this entire year. Now, I started out this video by telling you the 2.5 reasons I waited 2 weeks after launch to make my review. Well, the half reason that made me wait is I wanted to wait for the initial hype and excitement and novelty to fade so I could get some perspective, but I think by now you've realised it didn't fade, and I don't think it will. All the hype and anticipation were wholly rewarded, and after a decade and a half of the franchise, that is a truly remarkable accomplishment. Now, go away, I'm going to go back to filling up my Pokedex. Thanks for watching, I am Blunty, and I will catch you next time. Just go buy the game, it is brilliant.